Hi, my name is Keith Wood. I'm a community forester with the Colorado State Forest Service, and we're here today to show you how to properly select and plant a tree. One of the first things you want to determine before you plant that tree is how much above and below ground space that you have for that tree to mature in. You want to look around, make sure the tree is not going to be planted too close to a structure so that when it grows into that structure. You also want to look for any overhead utilities that might be present, any overhead wires, things like that. You don't want a tree maturing into that utility infrastructure over time. Another thing to consider is how much rooting space that tree is going to have to grow in. We won't see the benefits of a large mature shade tree develop over time if there's not enough rooting space for that tree to grow in. So look above ground, below ground. One of the critical steps in looking below ground is getting utility locates. And you're going to want to call 811 or 800-922-1987 before you put that shovel in the ground. It is a law in Colorado that you call utility locates before digging in the ground. Okay, your next step is heading to the nursery and deciding what type of tree you're going to plant. There are bald and burlap trees that are fairly large, pretty heavy, and more expensive as compared to the potted trees. The potted trees are usually less expensive, more easily planted in a yard situation too. Not as heavy, and they can establish a little quicker too because most of the root system is there. Okay, now we're going to get to planting this bald and burlap tree. The first thing we want to do is make sure the hole is the proper depth and width. And the rule of thumb we like to use is dig the hole 2 to 3 times wider than the root ball that you have. Check the depth of the root ball, either in the pot or the B&B tree, the bald and burlap tree. Check the depth. You can measure it with the tools that you have on site, such as the shovel or the rake, and dig that hole so that the root ball is going to be 1 to 2 inches higher than the bottom of the hole. Once the hole is the proper width, we can begin to plant the bald and burlap tree. The first step is to remove the bottom part of the basket. So we take a bolt cutters, we'll cut around the bottom half of the wire basket and remove that. Once that is removed, we can carefully place the bald tree into the hole. We want to be careful when we're doing this step so that the root ball doesn't fracture. That's why we're leaving the top half of the basket on. So once the tree is positioned in the hole, it's straightened, be sure that if you have to straighten it, that you're moving it by the root ball with a shovel and that you're not yanking on the trunk of the tree to try and straighten it, as that can loosen the roots in the root ball. So straighten it with a shovel, it's placed upright in the hole, then we can take the remainder of the basket off. So we cut the remainder of the top half of the basket off with the bolt cutter, take all the twine off that may be remaining on there, and then we have the burlap to deal with. So we're going to want to peel that burlap back. So one thing to check when the tree is in the hole is that there may be soil piled up on top of that root ball, and we want to be sure and pull that back. One way to check to see where that root flare is, you can just take a screwdriver that you have, poke it into that root ball and find where that root flare is coming off the trunk of the tree. The next step is planting with that backfill mixture. Usually the soils that we have here that we're planting in, especially in residential areas like this, are pretty good, and we can use that as our backfill mixture. If we have a real inorganic or heavy clay soil situation, we may want to add just a little bit of topsoil, but that's the only time I would say that an amendment is necessary. So we'll backfill around this root ball. We'll use our shovel to pack that in to reduce any type of air pockets that have developed in there. We don't want to tamp it down with our boots and things like that. We just want to backfill up to the top of that root ball. And then we can get to the mulching process after that. So the next step would be having a good organic mulch to use. Just an even 2 to 3 inches out to the extent of your planting hole. And be sure and pull that mulch back from the trunk of the tree too. We don't want any of that mulch that stays moist to be up against the base of the trunk of the tree, which can cause rot problems over time. And the next step after mulching would be considering if you need to stake the tree. More often than not, I think if the tree goes in the ground well, it has a good solid root ball, we don't need to stake trees. But if you're in a windy situation or some type of wind tunnel where there's going to be a lot of wind hitting that tree, you may consider staking the tree If you do, just stake it for a year. Make sure you're removing those stakes after 1 year. So we want to water the tree in at this point. If you have a hose available, that's the easiest way to do it. Just grab a hose with a spray nozzle, something like that, and just soak that tree in. Don't overwater it, but make sure you're getting enough moisture around that tree's root ball to get it going. Consider watering the tree as it goes. As it establishes, we're going to want to have a good watering system in place. Think about your irrigation system. If you have a sprinkler system, is it going to be set to run so often? If not, think about how you're going to be hand watering that tree throughout the growing season. And even in dry periods of the winter, we're going to want to consider watering. A general rule of thumb is 10 gallons of water per inch in diameter of the tree is what you want to apply. Also, keeping your mulch layer there. Tendency is for the mulch to break down. It can blow away at times, but make sure you're keeping that mulch around the tree as it establishes. It's good to keep it there at all times because it keeps the lawnmowers and the weed eaters back from the base of that tree if grass starts to grow up against there, which can damage the tree and really prevent it from establishing like we want it to. So with the potted tree, now we want to show some steps that may be a little bit different, that are a little bit different than planting a balled and burlap tree. The potted tree, you want to make sure that that root system is not bound up in the pot. So if you haven't checked it at the nursery, if you're at the planting hole, you want to carefully take that potted tree out of the pot and inspect the root system. So look for any roots that may be circling. They hit the side of the pot and started circling around the pot. That's what we call a potentially stem girdling root system. And before planting the tree, we're going to want to cut those circling roots so that we don't develop a circling root system as that tree establishes. The depth for a potted tree is going to basically be the same as with a balled and burlap tree. We want to place that root ball 1 to 2 inches higher than the hole we dug it. Once the tree is in the hole, the steps are the same then for backfilling it, watering and mulching it. So thanks for joining us today to learn how to properly plant a tree. For more information, you can visit the websites, the Colorado State Forest Service, the Colorado Tree Coalition, and the Arbor Day Foundation.